Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today we're going to do another one of my indoor gardening videos. And today we're going to talk about pots, fans, and heat mats. And the purpose of these videos is to let you know the items that I found that have been the most useful and made my indoor gardening the most efficient. Now you can personalize everything that I talk about and use the items that are the most useful for you. I'm just going to let you know what has been the most useful for me. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is pots. Now pots are really important, obviously, because that is where you grow your plants. That is where you put the soil, since we don't have in-ground beds indoors. We don't have raised garden beds indoors. We have to utilize pots. Now pots were very difficult for me to grow in for a long time because I just didn't really understand the importance of a lot of the things that I've been talking about in these videos. So the last video that I did talked about lights, and lights are very, very important, as is soil, which is going to be my next video. But first I wanted to talk about pots and what you need to look for when growing indoors. Now, one of the most important things about pots is to have pots that have good drainage. Now, you are going to be indoors, and drainage is not great unless you have something underneath the pots. And we're going to talk a little bit about the trays that I use to catch the drainage that comes out of pots. So drainage is very important. So make sure that the pots have good holes in them. If they don't have holes in them, you can always use a drill bit or some sort of heat source and put holes in your pots. The next thing that you need to think about is, are your pots food safe? Now, you are growing in soil. It's not as important as if you are putting water in the container and drinking out of it, but there's still roots that are going to be collecting nutrients and everything else that's in that pot. So make sure that you use pots that are safe for growing vegetables. Now that's something that I don't have a lot of knowledge about. I do use nursery containers and a lot of containers that are specifically made for growing vegetables. So I don't really have a lot of the specifics on the type of plastics that you need to use that are safe. So I will link some information down below that talks a little bit about that, so you can do your own research and understand what would be the best for you. Now the next thing is probably one of the more important things to think about, and that is, are your pots appropriately sized for the vegetables that you're going to grow? Now the first type of pots that I'm going to talk about, I'm actually going to use a clip that I made for my Beginning Gardener series that talks a lot about the smaller pots and seed starting, because that had a lot of good information in it. So I'm going to use that clip, talk a little bit about the small pots that I use, and then we're going to talk about the larger pots for the larger size vegetables that we're going to use. Now when it comes to what you can grow indoors, your only constraints are the size of pot, the amount of space that you have, and your lights. There are people who actually grow squash, they grow melons, cabbage, tomatoes. You can grow full-size tomatoes if you have the right size pot. But we're going to talk about pots, and I'm going to show you the size of plants that I grow and the size of pots that I use. Now another resource that I really actually like a lot is another YouTube channel called GtJr. Now he grows a lot of food in his yard, and he does a lot of it in containers. So he shows which things he uses outdoors, even to the point where he's grown potatoes in a cardboard box successfully. And he grows a lot of food indoors, and he uses various different types of containers, even to the point where he brought a green stock unit inside and grew plants inside over the winter. Now, I'm not going to be bringing a green stock or anything really large indoors. I'm a little bit constrained by the amount of light that I have in here, the amount of space, but the sky is the limit with what you want to grow. Also, Mi Gardener, in his earlier videos, he used to showcase a lot of the stuff that he grows downstairs in his basement. So he's also a good resource to show you what you can grow indoors. Now, I also did another video on hydroponic units, and that is something where the only experience that I have is the smaller units. So I'll also link down below a Facebook group that I've linked previously called AeroGarden, Kratky, and Gardening Fanatics. And if you use the search function on their website, there are a lot of different sized hydroponic containers that you can use, especially if you get into the deep water growing. I think it's DWC, deep water. Anyway, it's deep water containers. But you can grow hydroponically in tubs and in large buckets, and you can grow large vegetables that way. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about the smaller pots that I use. Let's go to the clip that I made for my Beginning Gardener series. Now when it comes to pots, there are so many different things that you can use. You can go from really cheap For example, this is a used pot that I got from a garden store when I bought my onion seeds last year. There's egg cartons. I don't like egg cartons as much as I like some of the other things. Egg cartons, you can put the soil in here, water them, plant them out into the garden, straight into the soil with these. But I've found in areas like mine where there's not a lot of moisture, the egg cartons don't rot down fast enough to release the roots of the plants. But in a pinch, these will do. You can't let the seedlings get very big, but you can use them if you would like. Another thing you can use is old cups. Now, I don't like to use the clear ones. This is one that I used for starting fig cuttings, but you can see that there's holes in here. You can put the holes in this any way you would like. What I used is a nail set that I heated up on my stove. So I used heat to put these holes in here, but you can do it with a screwdriver or a drill, whatever you want to do. So the clear ones aren't as good as the red plastic ones. So this one does not have holes in it yet, but you can use plastic cups to start seeds. You can use any plastic container you'd like, just make sure to put holes in the bottom. These are really amazing. They're pretty flimsy, so they're basically a one-use pot. I got 100 of these pots and they were $21. I'll put the Amazon link up on the screen, but these worked really well. You can save old pots from the nursery. Can use these kind of plastic pots, and a lot of these are free or reused items, and they work really well. Now this is another pot that I really like to use when I up pot my plants. It's a little large for just seed starting, but I really like this one, and I got this one on Greenhouse Megastore, and they're not that expensive, and I've used these for about 4 years. The one thing that I have learned with them though is not to leave them out in the sun when they're empty, because they will warp. Now we're going to move to the most expensive pots I got. These are from Epic Gardener. These are his Epic 6L trays, and they work amazing. These are the strongest pots I've ever seen. They've got a large hole in the bottom and slits up the sides. So it's easy to remove the plants out of your pots. And he's also got the larger 4-inch size. Now these are the taller ones, and I really like these for plants I don't want to up pot later. This one came from Home Depot. You can basically use these for 1 or 2 seasons. They're pretty flimsy, but they're really cheap at Home Depot. So now that we talked a little bit about smaller containers that I've used, let's talk about the larger containers. And I'll show you which containers I've used and the size of plants that I can grow in those. So these are some of the larger containers that I use. These are just old nursery pots. This is a 1-gallon container. This is probably a 1.5-gallon container. These, nursery containers, they come in various different sizes, and they label them different things depending on whose container they are. This is approximately a 2 to 3-gallon container, and you can go up to 5-gallon containers. Now, the reason I haven't started growing in 5-gallon containers is I have not figured out an efficient way to catch the drainage that comes out of the bottom. Because if you're going to grow in a large 5-gallon container, you are going to have to drill holes in it so that the water will drain out, and figure out a way to capture all that water. Now, I could probably use a tub that they use to mix cement or something like that in it, but we just have not gotten to that point yet. Maybe I will in future years, but right now the largest container that I grow in is my 2.5-gallon containers. Now for these containers, I grow tomatoes and peppers. I've grown peppers in 1-gallon containers, and I've grown them in 2 gallons. Now the 2-gallon container, the largest plant that I would think about growing in there is a dwarf tomato. Dwarf tomatoes get about 3 feet tall, and this worked out perfectly both inside and outside for growing dwarf tomatoes. Micro dwarf tomatoes can grow in these smaller pots. I've grown a ton of micro dwarf tomatoes in these pots, and they've worked beautifully. Peppers have worked pretty well in here, but they seem to be a little bit constrained. But they don't seem to be able to grow to the size that I want them. So the 2-gallon containers are better for that. Now, these right here are counted as trays, but you can use these as containers. Now, one thing that I would think about using this for, and you do have to be really careful because this does not have holes in it, you would need to either be very, very careful with your watering, or drill holes in it and then put it on top of another container. But onions, leeks, bunching onions, things like that you can grow, that you can multi-sow, would grow beautifully in here. Then you can just cut out the sections that you want to remove and plant and transplant them. So this would work really good for that. Now I have a ton of trays like this, and the reason I have all of these trays that do not have holes in them is that is where I put all of my containers to capture the water. These work beautifully to capture drainage. They also work beautifully for bottom watering. If you look down here, it's kind of hard to see because of the chair. Let's go around here. I have my kale and my chard growing down here under these lights. They're growing beautifully, and the way that I water them most of the time is I will just fill this tray about halfway up with water and let the water soak up into the pots. That's the fastest, easiest way to water these, and it works beautifully. Another thing you need to think about with containers, especially for seed starting and if you're going to start cuttings of plants, is you need a humidity dome. Now, I got these humidity domes from Greenhouse Megastore. You can actually go to Home Depot or Walmart and get kits where they have a humidity dome, a tray, and inserts. You know, inserts like the ones that I showed you previously when I was talking about smaller pots. So they can be very cheap. These are not that expensive, but they are tougher than the ones that you can get from Home Depot, the ones that I get from Greenhouse Megastore. I try to get as heavy duty as I can afford. And then you can reuse these over and over and over. Now this type tray, it's just for smaller things. I use this a lot for cuttings because the humidity dome that I got for it is taller. And you can actually grow things in here for longer because you can control the amount of humidity that is in there. This is another tray that I've used. I did a special video on this. This is one that I was gifted from a company called GrowFriend. These are for seed starting, and it's worked just as well. You can see the amount of water in here. I do have the humidity wide open, so it is capturing a lot of humidity, but not too much. So now that we've talked about pots, let's talk about fans. Now, fans are really important for your seeds for several different reasons. The first one is it creates stronger stems. As the breeze of the fan goes over the stems of the plants, it moves them, and as they move, they strengthen. It also disrupts the fungus gnats just a little bit. You still get fungus gnats, but the fungus gnats are little, and if you have a strong enough breeze, it makes it hard for them to fly around and spread themselves. And the other thing that it does is it helps reduce the chance of fungal diseases. If you can get good airflow, good oxygen through the room, and reduce the amount of humidity just a little bit, then you can reduce fungal issues. So let's look at the fans that I use and then talk about different kinds of fans that you can get and use, and the important things you need to think about when purchasing fans. Now I turned this fan back on just so you can see how it oscillates. It oscillates and it reaches every corner of this grow room. So that is important. It's also a very strong fan. So even though it's way over here, if we turn around and look at these plants that are across the room, when the fan goes past them, you can see that they move a little bit. And that is helping strengthen their stems. It's also helping get rid of the fungus gnats a little bit. I still get fungus gnats. And it's helping reduce the chance of diseases. I have never had problems with fungal disease in my grow room. Now there are many, many different kinds of fans that you could buy. You could buy an oscillating fan like mine, small, large, whatever size that will cover the area that you need to cover. Or you can buy clip-on fans. You can do clip-on fans for each one of your shelves. You can also even do a box fan. If you have a really large room, you can just do a box fan on each side, and that would help tremendously. So when looking for fans, look at what you can afford, look at the size of your grow room, and make sure that every area is covered. And then look for durability. You don't want to continuously be purchasing fans over and over and over. The fan that I have, this oscillating fan, is a Vornado, and I've had it for, wow, probably, I think I've had it since 2005. And it's 2023. That's a lot of years without having to purchase another fan. Didn't purchase it for the grow room in particular, but it has worked beautifully for the grow room. Now I also have my fan on a timer. It's plugged into my power strip that has a timer on it, and it goes off and on with all of the lights. Now the next thing I want to talk to you about is heat mats. Now heat mats are important. They're not absolutely necessary to be able to grow indoors, but they do help a lot. The thing they help the most with is germinating the plants that need bottom heat so that they can actually germinate. So some plants that you can grow indoors that need a heat mat would be tomatoes and peppers. They need that bottom heat to germinate quickly. Now I've germinated tomatoes and peppers without bottom heat, but it makes it kind of chancy whether or not they're going to actually germinate. But let me show you what I have and tell you kind of why I have them. Now I have 3 of these smaller heat mats. 2 of them are from Ferry Morris. I just got these at Walmart actually. They are not expensive and they've lasted me at least 4 years so far. So they've been really good quality even though they are not that expensive. You can get them off Amazon. And then actually with my GrowFriend Grow setup, I actually have another heat mat. Let me show you that one. So this unit right here is on a heat mat. It does seem to not be extremely even in its heating, but that's okay because the soil inside is all heating up pretty evenly, it looks like. You know, the edges on this one seem to be pretty cool while the center is quite warm. Now with my other heat mats, they seem to be a little more even. So with the cost of what this grow unit is, I think this heat mat would be worth it because it does work with heating the soil. Now I have this large 4-foot heat mat that I use under multiple trays to germinate seedlings. I've used it to start cuttings, and this is where I actually cure my sweet potatoes. Now it's not on right now, but you can actually set the temperature on this thermostat for your heat mat. So the way it works is right here. It's right here I have my heat mat, my large heat mat, actually plugged into the unit. So that's where my heat mat is getting its power, and that's where the unit is getting its power. Then you have a plug to plug the unit into the wall. And then you have a temperature sensor. The sensor is hooked to the unit right there in the center. And you stick this either in the tub with your sweet potatoes or you stick it in the soil. And that way, when it reaches the temperature that you've programmed into the unit, it will turn off. When it's gone below that temperature, it will turn the heat mat back on. Now the large heat mat and thermostat are definitely not necessary to grow indoors, but it really does help expand what you can grow indoors. So you need to think about what you want to accomplish indoors, think about how you want to grow indoors, and then purchase the items that would work best for you. Now you can do it as cheap as you would like, or you can do it as expensive as you would like. Now I try to go right around mid-range because I don't like to spend a ton of money, but I also don't like to continuously replace everything that I'm using. So I'd love to hear about your indoor grow areas. What are you growing and what kind of equipment do you use to grow? Do you use large pots? Do you use small pots? Do you recycle things? Do you purchase specialized pots? Have you actually grown anything as large as cabbage or squash indoors? I would love to hear all of that. Now another thing that I would like to add is there is a special grow challenge going on, and that is by Mike's Chaotic Gardening. He has a channel where he does a lot of indoor growing, and he's partnered with another channel, and I'm going to put their information down below if you'd like to follow along and join their challenge. Now I'm going to be planting my seeds in the next video. You know, I definitely have a lot of stuff growing indoors already, but for that challenge I'm going to be planting my seeds in the next video, and I love the first video he did for this challenge. And what he said basically is just put a seed in the soil and see what happens, and that's where you need to start. Grab whatever containers you have, use the lighting that you have, put a seed in the ground and see what happens. And I can promise you, you will be instantly hooked. It's amazing to be able to grow and produce food inside your own home. No matter how much food you produce or how you produce it, it's a lot of fun. So hopefully this video has been helpful for you. If it has been, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.